the session together with 2 county commissioners and 1 town council person.
I don't need to be here, I'm just listening.
We have DEQ with us today, Rachel and Larry, and we'll go over the discussion of what the DEQ wood smoke group have been doing, different aspects of it. And then the concluding part would be kind of where we at with our 2.5 here in Lakeview, right?
Yes, and that's actually gonna be part of the presentation too, so.
What's that?
It's actually gonna be part of the presentation also, so.
Okay. Go, Mike. Got a sign in over there, Mike, at the doorway. All the comments, 2 council persons and 2 commissioners.
All right, should I go on up then?
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully you all will be able to hear me. I don't know if I should sort of sit sideways or anything like that. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rachel Sakata. I'm an air quality planner with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. And I'm here to talk to you all today just about, as Commissioner Kessler mentioned, the DEQ statewide wood smoke work group. And I'll explain a little bit about what the work group's about and sort of why I'm here. We want to get some feedback from members of the community, and so I'm going to present some of the information. And I don't know if this will fit in, if you want to do questions during or after, which makes sense.
Are you on a tight time frame?
I am not.
Then let's just answer questions as they come up then.
Great, so please feel free to ask any questions, because I really want this to be an open dialogue as much as possible. So thank you, commissioners, Commissioner Kessler and Commissioner Winters and Mayor and City Council members for letting me come and talk to you all. So I'll go ahead and move on. So basically, I think a lot of you know a lot about wood smoke. Thanks very much to Amy and Ray, who've done a lot of education in the community. Why is wood smoke a concern? Well, it's got PM 2.5. It's also got air toxics. Oregon has had a long history of burning wood, particularly wood stoves in communities. And so, that wonderful crackling fire you get from wood stoves can also be problematic because, wood smoke contains many of these harmful air pollutants. So what is particulate matter, or PM 2.5, which is one of the components of wood smoke? It's basically, particulate matter that's 2.5 microns and smaller, so it's really small. So just to give you an idea of how small that is, that's a strand of hair, that's 70 microns in diameter. So PM 2.5 is just those tiny little dots on there. So the thing with PM 2.5 is that it can get really deep into the deepest part of your lungs. It can cause a lot of health effects, cardiac problems, asthma, respiratory problems, even premature death. And so because of that, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has established health standards for PM 2.5 because of the concerns. So this just kind of gives a little overview of what the standard has been. So EPA, under the Federal Clean Air Act, sets health standards for pollutants, and this includes PM 2.5. And so states are required to monitor and identify any areas that are not meeting the standards. And so those areas that don't meet the standard are designated as non-attainment, which means they're not in compliance with the standards. And so then they have to develop and implement plans to bring them back into compliance. So you've probably heard a little bit about this within the community about how we're just trying to make sure that the Lakeview area does not become non-attainment. And the reason, sorry, what?
Can you just elaborate a little bit the authority pattern between Environmental Protection Agency and DEQ?
Sure. So the EPA sets these standards. They delegate to states to sort of, they delegate to states to do the monitoring, to do the work. And so what happens is the states will then develop plans to bring areas back into attainment. We oftentimes will work very closely with the community to figure out ways to prevent, to clean up the air. And so the concern, I don't know if this is getting it for what you want or wondering about, is that if the area can't bring the area back into compliance, the EPA can just come in and just unilaterally say, we're going to make you do this, this, and this. We're just saying you have to meet these standards, you have to put on these controls, you have to do all these things. Whereas with the state and the local community, we have more of a say in being able to craft a plan that makes sense. So for example, we may decide that we want to do wood smoke curtailment calls, as opposed to where the federal government may come in and say, you cannot have any uncertified wood burning devices in your home whatsoever, and they have done that in some areas. So there's sort of a little bit of flexibility. So EPA basically, sets the standards and we just help implement them.
And that's kind of my jest is that we don't want to get underneath the thumb of EPA.
Right.
We'd much rather get in compliance with our own means and willingness.
Exactly. And so the whole issue with, this thing about non-attainment, for one, it means that the air is unhealthy, and it also brings a lot of economic restriction. It's sort of, the stigma of non-attainment can be a detriment to the economic development of the community. So I think you may have heard a little bit about Klamath Falls, a little bit to the west. They are a non-attainment community because they are violating the health standards. They are, definitely sort of experiencing the difficulties of being able to attract new businesses because of the fact that businesses that want to locate in the area have to put on more stringent controls. It is way more costly. And so it's difficult to sort of bring up the economic and sort of development in that respect. It also triggers a lot of legal requirements that, areas have to meet. And as Commissioner Kessler mentioned, it's basically, you end up with a 30-year date with EPA is what it boils down to, because EPA is going to be scrutinizing you and they're going to say, we have to have you keep developing plans. So it's something you don't want to deal with whatsoever. And so basically, this community has dealt with PM issues in the past, back in the 1980s when we were doing PM10, and that's when the lows were around 150 micrograms per meter cubed. And then, the air was brought into attainment with the standard, and then EPA lowered it and changed it to PM 2.5, or I shouldn't say changed it, they added PM 2.5 as another pollutant to regulate because they saw that there were concerns with the finer fraction of PM. So that was at 65, and the area was meeting the standard at that point, so that was great. And then back in 2006, they lowered it almost by half again, down to 35 micrograms per use cube, which is currently where the standard is, and that's what we're trying to make sure that the air is clean. And so, there's been a lot of strategies in the community to make sure that we stay below the standard, which is the wood stove curtailment, and doing change-outs, which I know have been occurring in the area, and also just education and outreach. So what I wanted to do is just kind of point out sort of where Lakeview is in relation to other communities and also in relation to the standard. So that red line up there, that is the current EPA standard. So that's the 35 micrograms per meter cubed. Lakeview, unfortunately, is above the standard right now. But we've been doing, the community's been doing a lot of work to try to bring those levels down. We've developed what's called a PM advanced plan, so I know there's been a lot of, work with just the curtailments and education and outreach and change outs. And EPA determines compliance based on sort of what we call a rolling period average. So we look at the most recent 3 years worth of data to determine compliance. And so this is based on 2013, 2014, 2015 data. So right now you're at, I think, 56 micrograms per meter cubed. And then after 2016 occurs and we get the monitoring data, then we'll sort of take another look and say, okay, what's our 2014, 2015, 2016 average? And so that may change just depending on what the numbers are. The good news is that last year your numbers were, I believe, 33. So that's below the standard, so that'll help your overall average, so hopefully it'll start bringing things down. But I wanted to point this out too, because it kind of gives you an idea of how Lakeview's not the only community struggling with wood smoke issues. You've got Klamath Falls and Oak Ridge, which are the two areas that are currently designated non-attainment. You've also got Lakeview and Pineville, which are above the standard, which we're working closely with communities to bring those levels down. And then you'll see I have this line at 30, because that's also a level that EPA has been looking at recently as a they have to revise the standard every 5 years, or look at the standard every 5 years. So that's one of the numbers that they've been looking at in consideration to lower the standard to. And so that just kind of gives you an idea of how many other communities might also be affected. So if EPA lowers the standard, that means any community above that is going to be designated non-attainment. So you're looking at another 6 or 7 communities. So this is a statewide issue. And is there a question?
Yeah, you just had a slide up there that showed the old standards.
Right.
And then they dropped the standards.
Right.
And then they dropped the standards.
Right.
Are they gonna do it again?
They might. And the reason why they dropped the standards is because it's based on the latest health effects
So what they're
information.
gonna do is drop the standards so much that they're gonna make it unattainable.
Well, so that is always a concern. Like I said, EPA looks at it based on health effects data. And, and so if they determine that, people's health are at risk, then they will lower it. EPA did just recently look at the standard back in 2012, and they kept it at 35 because they said the health effects information said 35 is still a number that is protective of public health. So they may not change it in the future, but it just depends as more data comes available. But it is a bigger challenge for communities because as that number gets lower, it gets harder and harder for communities to meet that. So it is definitely a challenge. So that's also why we have a number of strategies that communities try and put in place to make sure, that their numbers are well below. But yes, it is hard. So let's see here. So this also just kind of gives you an idea of what the sources of PM 2.5 are in the Lakeview area. It is predominantly due to residential wood combustion, about roughly 75%. So that is the challenge. And then we estimate the other 25% comes from a combination of permitted port sources or industrial sources and all other sources. And whether it's transportation, things like that. So wood smoke is a huge contributor in this area. And you see sort of a similar kind of makeup for other areas in Oregon. Klamath Falls, Medford, Prineville, it's more around 50%, but wood smoke is is the largest contributor.
And that's mostly during times of inversions.
Right. And
During times of non-inversion, that's commonly not a concern.
Right, you definitely see higher levels during the inversions that occur in the wintertime. And so the PM 2.5 problem, if you look at the monitoring data, you will see that it starts to go up starting around October when it starts to get cold and the winter wood heating season starts. And those levels stay pretty high until about February, and then it drops off because it's not as cold, people aren't heating up their wood stoves as much. And so it's associated with being more of a wintertime problem for PM 2.5 here. So anyway, so because of the growing concern about the health and economic effects of wood smoke in communities across Oregon, as you saw, there were 6 or 7 communities that were potentially in danger of violating the standard. The state legislature passed House Bill 3068, and the bill was essentially geared to, tackle the issues that are facing these at-risk communities through a study and recommendations specifically to examine wood smoke in communities. And so a number of so the bill basically directs DEQ to study ways to reduce wood smoke emissions, to look at alternatives for older polluting wood burning devices with cleaner burning ones. Also to look at opportunities for biomass fuels such as pellets and biobricks. And I'll describe, and so biobricks, just so you know, if none of you are familiar with it, are basically these bricks of compressed sawdust that are maybe about this size, some are a little bit larger, and those can be burned in wood stoves. And also to look at reducing the cost of wood stove alternatives during poor air quality days, because as you know here, when there's a red air quality day called, you can't burn in a wood burning device. And so, one option was trying to see if there's a way to help people who are, having to use electric or whenever it's not gas here, or other types of fuel for burning. So, so basically, so what's happened is DEQ's formed a work group to look at these issues, and then the work group will provide recommendations either for legislation or funding requests to the legislature, and then that report is due in the fall of this year. So essentially, the reason why I'm here is I wanted to talk about sort of what those work group recommendations are. And Commissioner Kessner is actually on our work group, and actually former Lake County Commissioner Jane O'Keefe is actually the chair of the work group as well. And so it's been great. We have a range of stakeholders who are on this committee who are affected by wood smoke. So we have a number of local communities, so folks from Klamath Falls and Medford and the Portland metro area, Prineville, Lakeview area, Oak Ridge, thank you, yes. A number of elected officials. So we have Commissioner Kessner, the mayor of Oak Ridge, We have public health agencies, we have folks from the biomass industry as well. So for example, Bear Mountain pellet fuel is on the work group. And also businesses, so we have Collins Company who is on our work group because they are affected by any potential non-attainment, because if, for example, Lakeview is declared non-attainment, they're gonna have to put on more costly controls. So what is that gonna mean for the community?
Do you have wood stove manufacturers on that?
Yes, we do. We actually have the Hard Hearted Barbecue Association folks on the work group. So they help represent the wood stove manufacturers as well as pellet stove folks, things like that. And we also have we have environmental groups. So for example, Oregon Environmental Council is on our group, as well as some local private citizens who are interested in the issues, and then a number of state agencies. So
How can I get a list of the people that are on that?
So the list of the people is available on, let's see, let me make sure. Actually, I need to double check and make sure the list of folks is available on our website. We do have a website about the work group, and so it does list, if it doesn't have a list of work group members, we'll make sure it does. And so we've had 4 meetings so far to discuss the issues. It's been really great, you know, just because it's been great information sharing and just having real world examples of sort of how communities are trying to tackle this problem and what will and will not work. Because I think, as you all know, there is definitely a strong culture of wood stove use. You know, there are people who like to go out and get there's easily accessible wood supply. There are challenges with having alternate sources of fuel. For example, Lakeview and Oak Ridge don't have natural gas availability, so that's one option that is not available to them that is in other areas. So, you know, just trying to tackle all of this and figure out what will and will not work. And so, you know, part of this is the recommendations that they've come up with to try and tackle this issue, and they also want to hear from the public, you know, what they think of these recommendations. So one of the key recommendations is to provide funding to local communities to address air quality needs. And so, you know, this would allow communities to fully fund a dedicated local air staff person year-round in the community. I know, Amy, you do a lot of work here, but you also do a multitude of other things. And so, you know, I think just being able to tackle this full-on would be helpful to have some people really be able to spend more time on it and have the funding to do that. You know, over the past decade, essentially community funding has been reduced, and so the funding that currently is provided to local communities is just, you know, not adequate. And so the funding that we get is from the legislature, which DEQ then passes on to local communities, and I know you guys get just a small amount to run a great program for what you do, but I know it'd be great if you could do more. And part of what would be more is that you know, you could help spearhead more air quality programs, do more education and outreach, you know, have, you know, someone who could be here to, you know, assist folks with more wood stove curtailment and change out programs. Also, you know, home weatherization, because as I'm sure all of you know, what good is it to put in a brand new heating device if your home isn't properly weatherized, because then all the cold air just goes right back out again. So that's really important. And also, you know, having someone who could possibly even help write grants and get other funding, so we're not always having to ask the legislature for this funding. So whether it's getting grants through private, philanthropic, other public organizations to help supplement the work that is being done. You know, that definitely takes time and dedication to do. And, you know, and it's just sort of just having that person to, you know, giving the local communities that ability to really be able to put the effort behind a really robust air quality program. I'm impressed, honestly, at what you guys are able to do. I think it's fantastic, and I can only imagine what more you could do if you had more funding to do so. And so, you know, and just knowing that there's increase in sustained funding to do this, I think would help make the work easier, because you know that it'll help you budget and also help you solicit matching funds, you know, as part of these grants. So that's sort of the key recommendation. And I don't want to, Ken, if you have anything else you want to add, since you've been key part of these you know, discussions. So that's the key recommendation, and so that I kind of label as a tier 1 recommendation, because that's sort of the cornerstone of the recommendations. And then sort of as a next step level, so what we call tier 2, the more long-term approaches which require more time and effort to implement as well as additional funding, would be would so change out program with funding. So I know you currently have one here, but the funding will run out eventually, and it's still not gonna replace all the stoves that we need to replace. So one of the other work group recommendations is to fund a change out program. It'd be a 2-year program. I think we can be asking for roughly $2 million to do this. And so communities could apply, because there's Oak Ridge, and there's a number of other communities that are also interested in getting a change out program. But communities would basically apply to be part of the program, and at the end of the program, they'd submit a report to the legislature saying, okay, here's how it went, here's sort of what was good, what was bad, so sort of a lessons learned, so it can be used to help other communities as well. And also, the community who would be able to receive the funding would also have to show how they can get some matching funds. So it wouldn't be just, $2 million grant. They'd say, well, we were able to get, say, $500,000 in-kind money from, this organization, or this other, this state agency to help with weatherization, things like that, to supplement the change out program. So one key component is doing the wood stove change out. I mentioned biobricks before. I think we were looking at biobricks, biologs as being a really good potential fuel source to help folks, especially during the poor air quality days, because as you you can have the regular firewood, but if it's not seasoned properly, it hasn't been dried out, and you're burning wet wood, it's gonna put out, a lot of smoke, and a lot of emissions. And so we're looking at trying to find a clean, another easily accessible source of fuel, so biobricks was one thing, but there needs to be more study done on that, because there's not a lot as much known about how these perform in wood stoves, and so that work group identified doing further study of biomass fuels such as the biobricks, or even looking into kiln-dried firewood, so that, be firewood that's been specially dried, it's got lower moisture content, will burn really well, and maybe having how businesses set up, looking into economic sort of accessibility of having someone local do that, so then you have that source readily available. So that's another thing. So that's sort of the next tier, and then once sort of underneath that, if they talked about doing supplemental projects, so if there's funding available to do additional projects, and that could be a firewood exchange. So people could bring in wet wood and exchange it for dry wood, or it could just be a firewood giveaway where people, for example, low-income folks, could get firewood for free or very reduced cost to make sure that they do have a good source of fuel. It could also be the heating bill fund to assist low-income residents during air quality days. So if you cannot burn, during the red air quality day, and you need to turn on your furnace or whatever it might be, this would be a heating bill to assist those folks, because it's going to be expensive, because I know it gets cold here, and just turning on the heater, you're just thinking, oh my gosh. So being able to help folks. And then looking at maybe a wood stove downing program, so that anyone who has an old uncertified stove could just turn it in and you would get $500 for that stove. So just be another way to get those old stoves out, even if it's just one sitting in a shop, because we want to make sure that people are burning clean devices.
Rich,
Yes.
fill in the gaps, because I don't have all the pieces, but we've had a stove change-out program that kind of, for the past few years, and money came with some constraints, like you had to get rid of the wood stove, take your electric, or do something else, and that kind of had adversely psychologically affected for it, because we all have wood stove heating culture here. But the whole main emphasis today is not to so much get rid of wood stoves, although if you have the option, economically, that would be great. But the real crunch is addressing those poor quality days, not all the other green days in between, but just focusing on the poor quality days, when we get that smoke and burst and so forth.
Right, exactly. And I think sort of another key part too, which is why the local community funding is so essential, is that you all know what will and will not work for your community. And so that sometimes, just I mean, to really get at air quality, I know one of the change out programs is to sort of try and swap it out for non-wood heating devices, or providing some other options. But in, you know, in other areas, they may not even offer wood burning whatsoever because they really want to get to it. Or they may say, you know, we recognize that we are not going to be able to take, wood burning is so ingrained. So we will still offer wood stoves and plus some other things. So it's sort of, we want to allow communities to tailor the program for what makes sense for you guys and not having to stay unilaterally just going and saying, you must do it this way and this way. Because, I mean, you know what works and what doesn't. So I think that's key. I think that's really important. And so giving the communities the funding and the ability to do that, I think helps being able to address the wood smoke issue.
Question, have the bio bricks, have the EPA tested the bio bricks?
They have not. So that's part of the reason why.
There's got to be adhesive that's used in order to hold that sawdust together, it's just not osmosis system.
Right, and you know, in talking, because the Bear Mountain Pellet Fuels person who is on our committee, he does make the biobricks, and so it's basically, he doesn't really use binders, it's just the way the sawdust is compressed, just the high pressure keeps it together. The problem, of course, is that if too much moisture gets in, then they're just gonna crumble. So part of, I think what we're gonna be looking at too is storage issues, you know, what are the ideal storage conditions and making sure that people are learning how to store them correctly. And in fact, the community of Oak Ridge is sort of doing a little pilot program to see what will happen, because if it's something that we want, you know, to help communities with and help support, we need to figure out what will work, because we don't wanna give folks a big pallet of biobricks and then have it crumble on them. I mean, that's just gonna frustrate people to no end.
So if we take away the top tier, just take that out of the picture for now, basically the beneficiaries of this are the bio brick manufacturers and the wood stove manufacturers.
Well, not, I mean, possibly yes. I mean, but really, they can see some benefit to it, but right now what we're saying is we want to study the biobricks to see if it's a viable option, because we don't want to go promoting it until we're confident with it. So they are aware of it. And with the change out, yes, I think manufacturers of wood stoves, plus other heating devices will definitely benefit. But ultimately, what it kind of boils down to is we want to improve the health of the community and the economics of the community as well. Because we don't want you guys to get non-attainment, because that's just going to make it more challenging. Because you don't want, you know, Collins or any Cornerstone or any of those guys leaving town because of the restrictions that would be put on them.
And we keep lowering the levels, so they keep making everybody not attainable. What was wrong with the original set guidelines?
Well, so, I mean, the reason why they're lowering is because of the health issues, because they want to make sure, I mean, because if you've got a sick community, I mean, you're going to have a workforce that can't go in to work because they're at home with breathing problems, things like that. So, I mean, it's sort of, I think, Ken, you know, we've talked about this a lot, you know, just the challenges.
Well, there's several things. Back to the people who benefit, meaning the providers.
Yes.
Yeah. The people who would benefit also, if we can stay out of attainment, would be the citizens also, so we don't have EPA putting a thumb on us and causing Collins to go out of business, or Cornerstone, or Red Rock not to be here, and just put out the economy in a part of nosedive, which has its own health. Well, it's not addressing the problem. One thing about the biobricks still need to be studied is they can burn extremely hot. And we need to make sure that the stoves can sustain that heat. So there's several things to be studied on the biobricks. But the biggest thing of my concern is health. We've got senior citizens who have breathing problems. We have young kids who would be predisposed to having future problems. And on the flip side of it, if we can't get entertainment and we get some heavy regulations coming down, they're going to put us in a different health scenario of poverty and low esteem that has its own health issues. So we're trying to address the health issues, the direct health issues and the economic health issues also.
So those are the key recommendations. We're kind of going on a tour just around the state to solicit feedback, because we want to hear from, communities that are impacted by wood smoke. So you're sort of the first on the tour, I guess you could say. And then we're going to be in Klamath Falls tonight to talk to them in Medford, and these are just the other areas that we're going to be going to, just because we want to hear back from the community. What do you think about these recommendations? Do you have any other suggestions that we want to take back to the work group and have them consider as part of their final recommendations? Because we will be having our final work group meeting in July, and we'll take any public comment, incorporate any changes, and then the final report will be submitted to the legislature in September. And so this is sort of the opportunity to sort of hear, do the recommendations make sense? Do you have other ideas that you want the work group to consider? Things like that. We do have a website available, so all the information will be here. I'm going to also post this presentation up there so that folks can look at it. So if there's anyone else who's interested but wasn't able to come, they can go online and look at it. If you want to submit comments also separate from this, then you can also do so. I'll set up, we'll have that up in the next day or two as a way to do that, or you can just write down my email address and send it to me, and then I'll make sure that the work group gets it at our next meeting. But really, we want to hear from the community, because just to hear, this will impact you. And, and as part of what we're going to be recommending to the legislature, are these recommendations, and trying to get the funding and things like that. And so just even talking to your local legislator, saying, this is important to us. This is, we want you to get behind this too, because this affects us. And, getting that support for saying, yes, we want to help fund the wood smoke efforts.
And I always like to address the folks that be watching.
Oh.
For them to also, if they watch this at home maybe tonight, today's 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, most people can't be here. Luckily, they have jobs, most of them. And anybody watching, I encourage them to give recommendations also.
Yes, please, that would be wonderful. So that's all I really have to say. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or thoughts or comments. I mean, I welcome anything.
I'll just reiterate that if we as a community, whether we agree with EPA standards or not, that is the standard. I have my opinion, I'm healthy, Brad's healthy, but that doesn't mean a kid down the block is healthy. It doesn't mean a senior citizen across the other side is healthy. But because if we don't educate ourselves and put an effort to control the commission to stay out of the non-attainment category, then it becomes out of our hands. And I look forward that we all come together as a community and try to meet the standard to the extent that we can.
It's out of our hands now. EPA sends it down, brings it down to the state. So we have to just do our best to be in compliance with the standards that come down. And the benefits are exactly what you said, is help our community, our industries, attracting industries here to be within the standard. Just a question, not about the air quality, but have you seen much change in any technology on wood stove building, catalytic converters, or anything? Because this is becoming a big thing across much of the U.S. And I'm sure that there's people out there trying to capitalize on building the new best mousetrap so that it performs the best. Is there any new technology that's come out, or I'm thinking catalytic converter on a wood stove. I mean, in California, vehicles have to meet a standard.
Right.
Catalytic converters are on all vehicles now. Is there anything like that you've heard of, or anything?
Yes, so actually, it's a great question. Actually, EPA recently passed standards for wood stoves. So wood stoves are now required to meet more stringent levels. EPA hadn't revised it in over 30 years. And so manufacturers realize that they have to bring their technology down to even lower emissions. So currently, so in past wood stoves, we're allowed to emit up to 7.5 grams per hour smoke. Now they have to meet a standard of 4.5 grams per hour, and in about 4 more years, they're gonna have to lower it down to 2 grams an hour. So they're really ratcheting it down to making sure that the wood stoves burn very clean. As you know, though, also, you can have the cleanest burning wood stove, but if it's not operated properly, then it's gonna emit, 2-3 times what it was rated at. So that's also, a critical component is making sure folks know how to burn properly, knowing, burning with the right kind of wood, seasoned wood, not damping down the fire at night. I know that you all have worked very closely with folks in making sure, people do recognize this. And so, and I want to also just kind of give kudos to, the town and the community for all the efforts you have done. I mean, because you recently put together the PM Advance plan to, help bring levels down. And we've seen the improvement over the years. I mean, you're down, last year was only 33. Granted, it was also mild winter, but still, that's significant. Because 2 years ago, your levels were at 96, 97. So that's a huge drop. So, I mean, I also want to give you guys a pat on the back, because the community's really come together to try and address this wood smoke issue. And so we're just trying to kind of build upon that and, figure out what else can we do.
Can you expand a little bit on the PM Advance program and on the communities who are in non-attainment that does not have that
Sure.
opportunity?
So if you're an area that's designated non-attainment, for example, Klamath Falls and Oak Ridge, we basically have to put together this huge plan with all this technical information and all these requirements. So it includes, okay, industry, you have to put on these certain controls to meet these certain levels. I mean, that is just no questions asked, and they have to do it. And, within the community, they also have to follow certain strategies to bring levels down. So there's certain requirements you have to meet just within the federal requirements of a non-attainment plan. This PM Advance plan that I've been mentioning is a voluntary plan. So it's for communities that are either close to violating or might be violating right now, but it's sort of strategies that the community developed to figure out, okay, what makes sense for us to do and how can we bring it down? So part of that was curtailment and more education and doing the change outs. And that's a plan that gets submitted to EPA, and EPA says, great, we want to see how you're doing. It looks like your level's starting to go down, that's fantastic. We won't designate you non-attainment right now because as you saw, you guys are above. But EPA said, we're not gonna designate you right now because we see that you are making a concerted effort to bring those levels down. And so it's more flexibility that the community has in terms of figuring out how can we address it, as opposed to within the attainment plan where it's sort of you've got to do these certain things.
And that's, the advanced plan is a 5-year plan?
Yeah, it's a 5-year plan. So I believe, we submitted it 2014, is that right?
Yes.
Right.
2014. So it's a 5-year plan. So you've got that in place right now. So, kudos to everyone here.
I think it's important to, in Lakeview, and there may be some of those other communities that are like we are, that do not have natural gas as a reasonable alternative, an inexpensive currently alternative to wood burning. Our program now, the wood stove change-out program that's been approved by the Regional Solutions team, the governor's office and the legislature, I guess, through that process, is going to allow non-certified wood stoves to be changed out to certified wood stoves. But in the process of doing that, people who take advantage of that program are going to also either have installed an alternative source or a current alternative source that may not be operating correctly will be upgraded, repaired as necessary in order to have that. And so the understanding is, yeah, you can burn your wood stove, and we all understand that that's perfectly acceptable 95, 96, 97% of the time, whatever the numbers are. But on those red days, you're going to have to use, and you're agreeing to use your alternative source. People get scared that, oh, it's going to cost me so much money to buy fuel oil or turn on the electric heat or whatever. It's only going to be for a limited amount of time. An inversion period, when we have them, typically lasts what, 5, 6, 7 days, maybe 10 days. I suppose it could be longer than that, but even this last year, we didn't have that. That's kind of the worst case. The rest of the time, your wood stove's perfectly fine. The wind blows, the air's warmer, whatever it is, it's, you know, the wood stove works just fine. We have a culture of burning wood in Lakeview, and you know, that over time is kind of shrinking itself as younger people decide that they would rather do something else with their Friday, Saturday, Sunday than go gather wood. They'd rather watch football or go to a kid's sports event or whatever and just turn up the thermostat. So that's kind of where we're going as a culture,
The
I think.
older generation was getting there.
Yeah, that's right. This winter was a good example. I was telling Rachel and Larry earlier today, I never built a fire in my wood stove all winter long. I just, you know, the fuel oil was well less than $2 a gallon too. So, but anyway, I think between helping people to use what they want most of the time and urging our community to change over the long term, we're going to get there. We are getting there.
To go along, Larry Calkins, DEQ, to go along with what you just said, Ray, another piece of good news is one of the things the work group is looking for, and we're looking for suggestions like this, is on those red days for low-income people to have their bill paid, electric bill or gas, maybe not gas bill here, but oil bill here, during those days that are red days. So those are the kinds of helpful suggestions that we're looking for.
I think our PM Advance Committee talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Of course, we didn't have the funds locally to do that. I don't know how it comes about. Maybe it's a tax on wood stoves or something that creates the resource to be able to fund that in the future. But you know, if you can set some income criteria and help people to offset those costs on those particular days, that would be helpful.
I think most folks, if they have a reasonable alternative, they would take it. And that's what this work group is trying to do, is look at what are some reasonable alternatives and how do we fund it.
The staggered periods for compliant stoves that they're building, you said that will, in 4 years, even be more stringent for the manufacturers of those stoves. That's what I hear the reluctance is of the citizens right now that use wood stoves, is why get a wood stove now in 4 more years, because the EPA or DEQ is going to dictate to me that it's going to be non-compliant. And I'm going to have to go through the whole process again. I'm not going to have funding, perhaps won't be available at that time. That reluctance, I think, that perhaps was thrown out there to the public by staggering and maybe not going ahead and saying, sorry, you got to build those now.
Right, and so what I should point out is, so these standards that are lowered for the wood stoves, that's for any new stove built. So if you buy a stove right now, that's, you know, what, 4.5 grams per hour, you're fine. You put it in your home, that's fine, you keep it in there. And you could, you know, if you decide you want to upgrade to a new stove, then you could still sell the old stove because it is certified under our law. But any new stove that you would buy in, say, 4 years would have to meet the 2.9 grams per hour. But like I said, this only applies to brand new stoves. So any stove, so if you bought a stove, say 2 years ago, and it was certified at the time of sale, you're okay. So we're not, you know, EP's not saying you have to rip out your old stove or anything like
But
that.
I mean, the 2.0s apparently are not available. We don't know what the cost will be in a few years.
Well, actually, there are some 2.0 stoves available now.
Are they expensive, or are they efficient for people to go buy, or are they just outrageous prices to where
You know, I don't
nobody
know
would
if
do so?
they're really expensive. They might be a little more expensive, maybe $100, $200. I'm just speculating though, but they are out there. I mean, they're not nearly as many. I mean, actually, pretty much all the stoves, even a year ago, almost all the stoves out there were already meeting the 4.5.
Is the change-out program,
And so the change
Structured
program,
to
I think,
cover
is
those
structured to meet the 2.0.
It is. I was just going to say, the program that we're doing here identified as, actually SCOA went through a sole source selection process where they have identified a wood stove that's available in the area that meets the 2.0
2.0.
standard, and that is the only wood stove that's available in this change-out program.
Okay.
There's 2 or 3, I think there's more than one size of the stove, you know.
Well,
depending
I
on
know
the
what
size.
to tell people, because that's been, I think there has been a reluctance when the introduction of those new standards were gonna come about. Well, if I buy one now, then in 4 years, I've gotta buy another one, so
Yeah.
why go to that?
So the one they'll be provided with this program, if they choose to use the program, will meet the 2.0 grams per hour standard.
Yeah, because we don't want people having to go rip out their stoves again, because that's,
And if they, if I got it right, if they bought the certified 2.0 today, and 4 years down the road, EPA drops the standard even more, they still grandfathered in with that 2.0.
Yes.
They don't have to buy a new one at that time.
exactly.
But anybody buying a new one, a new house or whatever, would have to meet that new standard at that time.
Well, I'm sure that'll help on the smoky days that are not considered red days.
Right.
But will the 2.0, bringing it down to that level, help on those red days to perhaps where they can burn and we won't be forced to breathe bad air?
It'll help. I think the challenge still is, it goes back to my whole thing of
What the wood process is?
how people are operating the stove.
Okay.
And so, you know, it's the wood burning emissions that are causing the challenge, especially, you know, on those red days where it's forecast to just, you know, be poor air quality. So I think, you know, having the red day components in there really does help make sure that, you know, we don't go over. So I think that will probably still stay in place. And I mean, and that's been really critical in bringing areas into compliance. Falls has seen that success, and I think you all have seen that success too.
Well, I liked your tier 3 wood exchange program.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people don't have seasoned wood, and perhaps if it's available and they can go exchange, maybe they will. You gotta try it and find out.
And we have to be creative and work as a community. A lot of people don't have an adequate wood shelter
Mhm.
to keep them most of all. And yeah, as a community, Boy Scouts or school or, you know, community service, maybe we can incrementally build a wood shelter for person X who's aged, can't do it himself or herself, they don't have the money. But it's an education process. Keep
Right.
that wood dry.
And those projects I mentioned, you know, the firewood exchange and the heating bill assistance and the bounty program, those are not, you know, set in stone, because the community has the option to choose what makes sense. And so it could be one, all of them, none of them, you know, if it makes more sense to do, you know, wood shelters for the community, then that's, you know, what supplemental project could be. So there's sort of flexibility in there in terms of figuring what makes sense for the community. So I want to clarify, that's not saying, you know, you must go do this. It's just those are some ideas that the work group has come up with. And here's, you know, what those projects could be, but there's some other ones out there. So, you know, building the wood shelters, I think, is another one they could put in there as an option.
I think one of the biggest things in here, submit and ask for comments or whatever. Since this advancement plan's been in place, probably the place that all of us could do better is on the educational side of it. I continue to get phone calls that people can't afford to run electricity. And when you finally explain to them that you only have to do this on red days, and we might have 10 in the whole year, or 12 in the whole year, that it's, you're not gonna have a whole 30 days and your power bill's gonna be there. So the educational side of it is the advancement plan that came forward, and that was a big component of it, is us, the county, the town, maybe on that part of it, need to ramp it up a little bit more to educate people. People are starting to accept it, they're starting to see, okay, we do make a difference. On the green day, we're gonna burn appropriate wood, we're gonna burn better. But on the red days, I'm not gonna burn, I need to use my propane, or I need to use my electric or whatever. And I think whenever people finally realize that it's not an $800 electric bill or $400 electric bill for the month, it's like, oh, so government isn't telling me that I have to burn it or use electricity.
Right.
And that's probably the most questions I've filled in the last couple of years, is somebody's just madder than heck, and I can say, whoa, come on, we only have so many red days. So county, the town, I think we ramp that up as much as we can. Yeah, and it's hard to get to a lot of people. You can have the public meetings, they put in all kinds of things in the paper, Amy does an awesome job and everything, but there's still, how do we get to those ones that are the naysayers, I guess, and educate them? So, don't have an answer, but under the comment side, that's one thing we all can do, help, and help from the state and everything, that outreach.
Yeah, and I want to mention too, during the work group discussion, the town of Oak Ridge has, they've done a firewood exchange program, or a community firewood program. And so that was a great opportunity, they said, for them, because they kind of got a lot of people out of the woodwork who they hadn't been able to reach, who were coming to get this free or reduced firewood. And that gave them the educational opportunity to say, hey, here's sort of our curtailment program, here's, the burning properly, here's, the change out opportunity, things like that, and so maybe it's,
I'm sitting here in the county where we have the prison and where we have our community service work crews that we give a lot of wood to a lot of seniors and vets, disabled people. I'm not sure that our wood is the best moisture content, but it is an opportunity to educate the people. So maybe we ought to set the example as the county on our community service and supply, because I forget how many cords, it's a lot that we supply to people that can't afford them.
Yeah, and part of the recommendations too is to give more funding to the community, so then you are able to do more of that education outreach effort. Because like I said, I'm impressed with what you can do with the little that you get from us, so.
It is communication and education.
Was there any other comments?
Yeah, just bringing up that subject of the firewood, you talked about kiln dry firewood. We have columns here, huge column. And rather than start distributing firewood to our elderly and people who are in need, why not talk to Collins, because they're gonna be affected if this goes through, and see if maybe they wanna kiln dry some firewood for us before we distribute it.
That's a good point. I'll talk to the Collins person who's on our work group about that.
Mutually beneficial.
Because, like I alluded to earlier, there's two health effects. One is the direct smoke particles, the other is the economy.
Yeah, my
And
children
if
both
EPA
have.
comes down on us, they're gonna go to Collins and say, put in new emission standards, and the cost is not a concern.
Yeah, my children both have breathing issues, so I'm as concerned as everybody.
So I just have a question about the education portion. Is there a recommendation from the work group about community education? Because I think that, I agree with Brad. I get a number of phone calls. I work for South Central Oregon Economic Development District, the Lake County person. And I get a number of calls or people stopping by my office, and they really, and despite all of the efforts that everyone has made to have it in the newspaper or the radio, whatever, we still have a ways to go. It's getting better. And we can use all of the good ideas that come up. But I think that's a huge component of this, as well as making sure that industry and everybody else understands, what we're dealing with in terms of compliance. So I would hope that there is that's well defined or well explained to the legislature, that that's a part that is integral to all of this.
Yes, and actually, so that is sort of another, I guess, tier of recommendations that the committee is recommending is more education outreach, sort of more coordinated efforts. And I think one of the recommendations is to sort of put together a statewide, small-scale statewide effort to have more educational materials available, and sort of, I guess, a repository that communities, any community can sort of tap into to utilize, or any citizen. There is a lot of information out there, but you kind of have to pick and choose at it. And so just having it centrally located, I think would be a lot easier for a person just to go to one spot and say, okay, here's all the information I need. So that's another recommendation out of the work group too that I didn't mention here. And, and I have more detail. that I can
Rachel,
talk
with
about.
regards to the education, I think it's really important anymore to be sure that the materials are available in the form that people will access it.
Right.
Because, you know, you can go print it out and set up a handful of flyers on the bench at town hall, and they'll lay there for all winter, because people aren't gonna read it. But if it's in a YouTube video possibly, or on our website with a
Yes.
link to a video at
Facebook.
DEQ,
Yes.
or someplace like that, and, you know, how do people access information nowadays? Electronic media.
Right, and that is something else that's part of the recommendations, is sort of multimedia, and actually that's also something DEQ is trying to work on too, is having more YouTube videos and things like that, because we are
We've
behind
done
the
that.
times.
Amy puts it on YouTube, or on, whatever that is, Facebook. See, I don't, and, you know, we have it on the reader board, we've got the light up at town hall, and, you know, we try to do, I go around and speak at the various groups, and, you know, it takes all of those things, but the trend is towards more being available in the electronic form, and when people can do it, educate themselves at their leisure instead of, you know, at a public meeting. Obviously,
We just need to produce a video, a YouTube video that gets 1 million hits, that gets
Yeah,
shared
there
by
you go.
everyone, and
That's
that'll,
all
you
there's
know,
to
get
it.
It has to be
everyone.
entertaining.
It has to be
too.
something really entertaining that'll get, you know, get all those eyeballs or something.
Yeah, I agree, we have to hit the digital, like Facebook and other, because that's where the population, most of the population. Some of us more vintage folks, like Ray and I, don't use it. So that's where
I'm
we
not sure it's vintage, but.
need to use the, like, community service who deliver wood to get them educated so that they can speak with my grandfather or somebody.
Mhm.
So it's multifaceted
Yeah.
on the communication. So,
Any other thoughts or comments?
but I'll just say, as Commissioner Winter mentioned, it's not to get rid of culture wood stoves. It's what do we do on the red and yellow days. Eventually, there'll be a transition, maybe out of wood stove, but wood stove's always gonna be there. But you need to focus on the red and yellow days, which could be 1 or 2 days in winter, or it could be 2.5 weeks. But those are the days, there's nothing that says you cannot burn on a green day. Enjoy it.
It's sort of, you don't wanna take away your wood stove, just trying to figure out how can we address the wood stove issue, and what makes most sense.
And one of the funding that'll go to the state is for the state to finance gas, so we have an alternative. In Lakeview.
you know, Sandy just mentioned something that, you know, I don't mean to put you on the spot. But you know, but it is a point. It's always been, if you read the rules, the ordinances, try to convey to people things, and there's always this gray area in the middle. And, you know, I think maybe a direction we ought to think about going possibly is either you burn or either you can burn or you can't. You know, you can't, sometimes, well, you know, maybe you can today and maybe you can't. You know, on the yellow days, you know, it's either black or white, it's red or green. You burn or you don't burn. That way you don't have to try to figure out what the exceptions are. And so I don't think that that's something you want to do immediately, but it might be one of those tier 2 or 3 things to look at, of making it more clear, you know, you can or you can't.
Well, if we get in compliance without having to get that strong, we're better off, because people don't really care for government telling them what to do in their own homes, to be perfectly honest with you. Hopefully we'll, through the volunteer work and everything, we'll get to compliance and indication with the good weather and everything too, we're heading that direction.
It's just surprising, you know, and this is only one example, but there's others, if I think about them for a while, that, you know, there's always that group of people who are the devil's advocate, I guess you could say, and that is, you know, well, now what if I do this, or how can I maybe do this? You know, and they're always kind of poking for where the hole is in it, and now I don't know that those are the people that are causing us issues, but not necessarily, but just food for thought. I think it's good.
Well, Ray, you're touching on exactly, how do we convince the people that it's their sole source to bring in backup heat so that they don't have only sole source, because they are the naysayers, or the ones who say, I'm going to burn no matter what, because it's sole source in my house.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of bringing them to the table and getting them convinced that, it's only 10 red days. It'd be great if you've done propane and electric those 10 days. So I understand, Sandy and Ray, where you're going, because you guys deal with that pretty often. Different people say, that I hear that some people come to me, there isn't a chance. They say there's not a chance that I'm gonna ever get rid of my wood stove, I'm gonna burn when I want. We have that component of people out there.
And there's also very few, there's some, but there's not very many places that truly are only sole source. Almost everybody, I mean, I don't know a house around that doesn't have electricity, that you can't plug in some heaters.
Radiator
water
heater or
heaters.
something,
I mean,
yeah.
you gotta then question whether the house is safely wired to support those kinds of
Devices.
systems, but, most houses do have some alternative sources in them already, and it's, we haven't been forced to
As
the
long as the
point.
power is on. That's the
Pardon?
issue I ran into, as long as the power.
As long as the power's on, and there you're back to pellet stoves, there is a pellet stove now that is a self-feeding pellet stove, that in the case of pellet stoves, most of them require electricity to feed, so, there's, back to the same thing, well, now what if the power goes out, what if, and if the power goes out, you kill the fire, I mean, what do you do if it's 20 below zero and the power goes out,
Yeah, but I switched my wood stove out for a gas fireplace, and now I'm sitting here going, good.
The thing with electrical.
And does that not require any electricity?
It does require
Yeah,
electricity.
yeah, and that's.
So if the power goes out, I have no wood stove, I have no fireplace,
Yeah,
I have no heat.
I sit there with the little mouse pedal, create a generator.
I come to
You
the
get the
clubhouse.
generator and plug that sucker in. That's what I do at my place.
But most power outage doesn't come during a calm inversion.
yeah.
Not saying that it doesn't always fit that criteria.
It comes when it's 23 below and they can't get to fix it. I'm on Surprise Valley, it's a little different.
But it usually has to do with a windstorm or something, somewhere that causes the system.
We don't have any inversion.
Now, there's some people out there that use fuel oil as a secondary source. We all use wood for primary. So they have fuel oil, but maybe the fuel oil stove is antiquated. Is that a possibility that funding for that wood stove could go to help upgrade that and probably get them off that wood stove, being so dependent on the wood stove?
So getting people off the fuel oil wood stove or getting over the fuel oil?
Upgrading the fuel oils, those are, some of them are, they're there, but they're fairly inefficient. So they're still using primarily wood, and the secondary is the fuel oil stoves. A lot of those are inefficient, so they really don't want to use those because it's not cost effective.
Right.
So, and some of that money could go over to help those people upgrade.
Well, I know under the current program, it's wood
stove or
stoves.
not.
I think for any future program, that could be a consideration, to look into. But I guess I'm not really familiar with too many kind of fuel oil stoves that are out there, so.
We have a lot of monitors.
Yeah.
Oh, the monitor oil
Yeah,
stoves.
monitor oil and the old, I know what he's talking about, the old oil furnace.
Big giant oil furnace.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
I forgot about the monitor oil stoves, so, yeah, we need to get those out, so I'm just.
Yeah, because I mean, if you could make them more efficient for the people, they would use them more, I know they would. Just-
Right.
Yeah, I'm not as well versed about the monitor oil stoves.
I don't know about efficiency, but I do know that the new program is beginning to roll out now. We'll look at making repairs to whatever alternative sources already exist in a house. Or providing them with one, and they will make repairs. I don't know if improving, efficiency, if there's an old stove, an old furnace, that how you increase the efficiency of it other than just service it.
Right.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer off the top of
Yeah.
so you make progress.
That's right, exactly.
The last thing I want is for EPA to put a fine on us. That would be devastating.
That's not the end of this one.
Probably even inefficient would be better to use the fuel oil on a red day than to go ahead and use wood, so.
Yeah, we did.
That would be my.
Even though we have
answer to
a
that.
plant stove, we still go to
Yeah.
fuel oil on this.
Rachel and Larry, thank you very much for coming.
Well, thank you for coming, everyone, and I appreciate your comments and thoughts very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
So Ginger, was your question?